take-home? Alderman? All right. Present. Present. Howell? Lonnie? Yes. Present. Present. And Carl. All right, with that, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First order of business is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions for today's agenda?
I would like to make an addition to the agenda. I would like the building expansion for a moment. Can we discuss that? The building expansion?
Anything else? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda with the addition to new business.
I'll let go.
Second?
I'll second that.
All right. Approval of the agenda, motion made by Titcomb, seconded by Hurt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. And motion carries. All right, on to the consent agenda, approval of the meeting minutes from February 12th, 2025.
I would motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, with a motion made by Cop and a second by Titcomb, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. And motion carries. All right, our library director's report. Mr. Ingallo.
Over peers downstairs in the children's office are finally complete, so we're looking at Jade back in her office at the end of this week. That mold issue in there has also been addressed. We'll be doing that larger inspection here in May, just making sure that the rest of the basement is clear of mold when we do our closure. Just wanted to finish up on that one. And a little bit of sad news here for us. After more than 20 years of service with the DAPL, our interlibrary loan librarian, Julian Polash, is going to be retiring here on April 4th. I hope you'll join me in thanking her for her time and everything she's done for our community. We're going to miss her a great deal. Beyond that, I have some expansion news for you. I have been working closely with city engineering and J.E. Dunn. We have kind of been combing through the expansion plan, looking for spots where we can try to save some money and then really bring this plan down to the lowest possible dollar amount. So far, that research has rendered what we hope will be about $100,000 in additional savings.
I'm sorry, what did you say? How much?
$100,000 in
Okay,
additional.
I didn't hear the first word.
Engineer Keller will actually be joining us at our next meeting to give you guys a more thorough and in-depth talk on how all of that process is going on the back end. I don't get as much time with J.E. Dunn, so he can field some of those questions with a little bit more knowledge than I can. He can also direct any questions you might have for them to them, so we can get you some answers if you have things you're curious about. A couple of noteworthy items from Engineer Keller. He did mention that if we can tie together our funding, J.E. Dunn is fairly confident we could break ground as early as May. Things are looking promising on that front. I'm really just waiting to find out those final figures from J.E. Dunn after this final round of cuts and revisions. patrons across the board, just so that folks can stock up a little bit while we're closed in May. We are going to be doing curbside service during that time as well, but because all of the items from the basement will be boxed up as we have to break down the shelves and move everything out of there, those collections won't be circulating during that time of closure. So we want to allow families some time to stock up on some items and have a little bit of library material that they might use during that time. And last, and most certainly not least, a little bit of a legislative update for you. Senate Bill 2307 did pass through the Senate. It is now on its way to the House. We don't have a hearing date set for that yet. I am keeping a close eye on it. It was revised a number of times during its pass through the Senate and will likely go through further revision during its time in the House. And so, it's a pretty big bill, Brittany, but essentially it covers library materials, what you can have in the building, who should have access to those materials, things along those lines.
I'm familiar with it, but a lot of people do, it's probably not.
Certainly. It's a big one. It's a 10-page bill. I would encourage anybody who is curious to go find the body of the bill. If it passes, it will represent some pretty large changes for us here in libraries across the state, so it is worth following if you are curious about it. I will keep the board posted as to any further developments on that. As soon as I have something finalized, you guys will be the first to know about it, so we can begin discussing how and what we need to change if we need to change it.
How big of an impact will it be on our library if it passes?
I was just gonna ask that, what is the financial impact of what that could represent?
It's hard to say without the final terms of the bill currently.
It changed.
Yeah, I mean, first it had things like Class B misdemeanors for library staff if you're found to be in violation. That's now a Class C felony. So that would represent, some really big changes, right? It would impact funding there. It is hard to say without the finalized text of this bill. So I don't want to speculate. If it goes through as written, it'd be substantial. That's everything I have for you. Do you have any questions on any of those items? And I'll went through it really quickly.
All right. Then we will move on to the approval of the expense report. Any discussion on those expenses?
I would like to just make clear that all of these expenses have already been paid, the checks have already been sent out, correct?
That's correct.
Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the expense report.
So moved.
Or a second?
I'll second that.
All right, approval of the expense report, motion made by Alderman, second by Hurt, discussion. All right, we will do a roll call vote.
Hickman,
Aye.
Alderman,
Aye.
Marsh,
Nay.
Hurt,
Aye.
Hall,
Nay.
Ani,
No.
Kuntz. Aye.
Count. Aye.
All right, 5-3, that motion passes. On to the financial reports.
hoping to keep it very thin.
But you're adequately staffed.
I do believe we're making some changes that I'll expound on a little bit later, kind of hoping to address some of that.
I did have a question about your vehicle maintenance. It took up quite a bit of your budget. Is that,
Well, the old bookmobile, unfortunately, left us a little bit of a parting gift. We had some generator problems during its last week of service. We tried to keep those repairs down to the bare essentials, but we didn't want to deprive anybody of service. So we made what repairs we had to keep it running and allow there to be heat in the vehicle so that Becky was not sitting in the bookmobile and kids were not, no heat. But the new bus is here, it's beautiful.
were you able to sell it?
So we were not.
That's right, it was that,
Due to the grant.
that grant,
Yes.
that certain grant that dispose of it, right?
Yes, there are big requirements for that. It had to be destroyed. We had to film the destruction of that bookmobile and send it in as part of the terms of the grant. It's all very mission impossible.
Yeah, 20 years from now, we might want to consider that as like maybe a fundraising opportunity. Maybe get a paper to destroy it. I mean, I don't know.
I think we put it in a raffle, says if you buy enough tickets, you get a hit with a sledgehammer. I think it's a great idea.
The one other question I think it was on the advertising, how high the advertising is right now.
So at the start of the year, we had one large expense. We tried a new avenue last year that we felt was bringing in a bit of extra help. We started running an ad up at River Peters. So it's a big chunk, but that only comes out once a year. So that large chunk is paid and done.
One question on the revenue sheet. Under donations, is that from the Friends of the Library or is that any?
So that can be anyone, but I will say that those are donations from the Friends of the Library, and I want to just extend a huge thank you to them. Every year, they come through for us to assist us with programming and make a lot of what we do here in terms of the summer reading program possible. We couldn't do it without them. If you ever have an opportunity and any donation, please stop them and thank them. They go out of their way to really make some of our big ticket programs run.
Keep this or pass it. You can keep it all day.
Any other discussion on the finance report? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the financial report.
I'll make that.
Second?
Second.
All right, that was a motion by Hurt, second, was that Oderman? Okay. Any discussion? We'll do a roll call vote for that as well.
Pickcomb?
Aye.
Waterman?
Aye.
Marsh?
Nay.
Hurt? Aye. Paul?
Nay.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Kuntz?
Aye.
Cop? Aye.
It was 6-2, that motion carries. All right, the last item under unfinished business is the library rules of conduct. No last week, or last month rather, no major decisions were made, but we had some good discussion. We're all gonna kind of think on it. I do believe, Commissioner Oderman, was it you that had talked about reaching out to Person Rec? And it was brought up, somebody had brought it up, but I didn't make note of it.
Yeah, I didn't know that was.
Okay.
supposed to be one that-
It was mentioned but not discussed. I think one thing, as we're looking at, especially with SB 2307, I think that's really going to, if it goes into place, it's really going to affect our code of conduct as far as age requirements and how we go about that. So unless there's further discussion, I would entertain a motion just to table that until the legislation is decided upon.
I'll make that.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Do we have anything in there that we needed to finish or were we good right now?
Nothing was being edited. Mr. Anguilla, do you want to speak to that or?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, particularly after speaking to Christina Whithill,
Yeah, I was just going to say, make sure that that conversation is with supervised areas, because a lot of those parks are not supervised, whereas the library is a supervised area. So when you're asking, if you in fact are the one doing it, ask about the supervised areas. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
There you go, please be more active, and this is, more quiet space, and plus, like I said, supervised, remember, I mean, it's so many different options in both places. Absolutely. Because I guess my mindset on that is like common sense would dictate that someone's a disruption. It would be appropriate to ask them to leave. Do we have to have that? Like, do we have to have everything, like, laid out in policy?
So given my last conversation with the city attorney, it's a good idea to have as much laid out as you think you might want. So, if you're gonna ask council, you should just keep it in mind and reference council's opinion. So the way we did it, that's council's opinion.
It's a bit more black and white, it's like Casper, it's like, absolutely.
All right, so motion on the table is, or the motion on the table is to table the discussion until the end of the legislative session. I believe the motion was going to hurt. Second was Orderman again. Is that correct? Okay, sorry. I didn't write it. Or was you? Okay, second by Ali. All right, all in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. And motion carries.
Time change, not yet?
All right, on to our new business. Mr. Anguiano, if you want to talk about our annual report.
So next to your packets, you'll find a nice 10-page document that includes our annual report. I will be doing 2 separate smaller reports for the Billings and Slope County Commissions as well. This will also be going to the City Commission here on the 18th, so you guys are actually getting first crack at this. So I welcome any notes if you have anything for me after this. To give you some highlights on our 2024.
Mr. Chair, just so I don't forget to mention this in the future, Ian, sorry to interrupt, in the future, could we maybe have, like, if we have a presentation like this, have it projected?
Yes, we certainly can.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
2024 was Lincoln Area Public Library's most successful year ever in terms of patrons through the door, program attendance, and circulation. With 76,695 patrons visit our library in 2024. That's 6,000 more than 2023. Our most heavily circulated collection of physical children's materials is 53,000 items. We had a lot of stuff coming out of the basement last year. And that was over 10,000 more than in 2023. So circulation saw a big leap. Digital circulation was our second biggest grower. 50,319 ebooks and digital audiobooks circulated in 2024. That was about 9,000 more than 2023. So some big jumps. Bookmobile services and school services also saw some similar gains. Not quite to the same scale, but still some records for us here at the Dickinson Area Public Library. We made more stops than we've ever made before. 306 visits across Stark, Slope, and Billings County. 2,631 items circulated from the bookmobile, and if you factor the schools into that, you can about double it. So just over 4,000 items there. We served 1,430 unique patrons across our bookmobile routes. Once again, not counting the students, you blow that up quite a bit, but as those are repeats and not unique, I've got those in a separate set of figures. The bookmobile also traveled over 14,000 miles in 2024. A bit of a jump as well from previous years. Some notable achievements for us in the last year. The APO reached future focus status for the state library. That is the highest achievable role that you can reach according to the state. We achieved that status on 6/3/24. As confirmed by the state library, that was a big one for us. It helps us gain more state funding. Kind of is the measuring stick we try to use to show that they're meeting the goals set for us by the state of North Dakota. So we're really excited to hit that goal this year, or last we've, as you know, we've been attending these meetings regularly, addressed some long-standing maintenance issues within the facility. To date, we've repaired and replaced some windows down in the basement. We have plans to repair and replace the bank of windows above the computer lab. We've repaired damaged masonry. We've budgeted for the replacement of those external doors to historic standards, and a whole lot more is coming on those down that front to address water damage and other things that have kind of stacked up over the last few years. In 2024, we actually shrunk the budget by 20% for 2025 without any reduction in service. So we are trying to make those tax dollars stretch further without asking for more. And we're going to keep doing our best to the most things we work on that front. We have also, for the first time ever, gotten library board representation for Billings, Slope, and Stark counties. That was one of my big goals when I came back as director here, to make sure that everybody was being represented on this board and that all of our constituents had a voice here. Another noteworthy internal role, we had 0 requests for reconsideration in 2024. So that was a nice change of pace from some of our previous years.
So what, reconsideration to what?
So a request for reconsideration is a request for an item to be either relocated or removed from the shelves. Some of our external achievements. We established programming partnerships with our local schools. This was another big one for me when I started as director here. We didn't have a big presence in the schools, and I wanted to change that. We now host monthly programs at the middle and elementary schools. We are in talks with Trinity and DHS to do the same. My hope is, in the not-so-distant future, we will be running programs at all of those schools, at least on a monthly basis. It's a big pull, but it's something I'm excited for us to be doing. We've doubled our outreach stops to elder care facilities here in Dickinson in 2024. That's something I'm very excited about, and Jada has really been going above and beyond in that regard. She has provided some exceptional service, just getting out there and providing folks who can't really get into the library a little bit more of what they need. And the schools are not the only places we've created those partnerships. We've been looking for things like experience passes, other valuable educational resources that we can extend and get families into at a reduced or completely free cost. So we created some programming to that effect to get families out in the community across North Dakota for free. So for instance, you can go up to the circulation desk, you can pick out a park pass and go visit a state park for free. You can get a pass to go to the Bismarck Zoo, take your whole family at no cost to you. You just check it out with your library card and off we go. Same with the Science Center here in town and in Bismarck, and we're looking to expand on those partnerships. We were really thrilled with the response from these businesses and organizations. Many of them gave us either free of charge or very reduced prices on these deals so that we could make these things available to library users. We were really excited about that one. And Jade Prowse spearheaded that one for us, so if you have a moment, you reach out to her and thank her. She is always looking for new and exciting ways to provide to the community. And last but not least, we hosted our first ever clubs fair. We hosted everybody from the Lions to the Rotary Club. We hope to continue doing that. We actually filled all 10 of the spots we had available on the day that we did it. We had 75 folks show up on top of all the folks who came in to represent the clubs, just to kind of build those partnerships here and give a little bit back to the folks who are always trying to support us. I'll get you to the fun parts. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about programming. This is all just good things. So story times in 2024. We hosted 53 sessions for children ages 3 to 5. We had 956 kids attend those story times. Great numbers, a bump up of about 8% over last year for that age group. I am shocked it keeps growing, but so excited to see it. Similar with our there's a little bit of technical difficulties there. Similarly with our kids in age groups 0 to 2, we had 410 children show up over 26 story time sessions. Really excited to keep providing for that age group as well. We know it's kind of tough for the really young kids to find some place to be with their We are growing, those tend to have sign-up lists, and they fill up pretty quickly. They're a little bit labor intensive because the children's librarian has to generally build items and crafts for these to happen. We're looking at getting her a little bit more help so we can expand on that as we go forward and maybe offer a little bit more if we're able. And Rough Readers is a personal favorite of mine. So this is one we do in partnership with an individual here in town. They have a trained service dog, and this one's just to help our young readers. So kids ages 6 to 12 can sign up for a time slot. You read for 15 minutes to this very well-trained dog, and it kind of helps young kids overcome a little bit of that anxiety, reading in public, reading aloud, helps them build some confidence in those reading skills. It's a very popular program, so much so that we've had some siblings kind of double up on slots so that everybody could get a turn to read the standings, so it's a really nice one. I spoke a little bit earlier about about some of our school partnerships, but of the two that we managed to kick off in November of last year, we had 100 children show up for our Dickinson Middle School lunch events. So we had quite a few kids show up for the programs, but we only ran 2 and we had quite a turnout. We're looking to keep growing and offering different things. We're in partnership with the teachers there, trying to figure out what's going to suit them best. So I'm excited to see how that one evolves and report back as we continue to go. As for our community partnerships, I just wanted to highlight a couple things for you. I've already spoken a bit about experience passes, but we also host a clothing drive in partnership with United Way called Seeds and Feeds. That gets clothing, undergarments, young children and families who don't have them. Doesn't cost anything for those folks to participate, and we always get a great turnout. Lots of people donate. It's just a great way for folks to get back and help out some people who might need it a little bit more. Another one I really enjoy is this Pitter Patter Club. It's hosted by Andrea Evanson, and it's a music class hosted here every other month. She brings in instruments. She works with the kids. It's a really great program. And last but not least, we spoke a little bit. Oh, this one too. All right. I'm gonna keep going. I spoke a little bit about our outreach and elder care facilities. One of the programs I wanted to talk about is one that Jada is doing out with St. Luke's Home called Armchair Travels. So she and the residents. All right, one more time. Mic number 3. See if we can do this. She and the residents will select a foreign country. Jada will do some research. She'll bring in a popular dessert, some research on it, and she'll have a discussion with the residents. We'll get a little bit of a snack and just get to travel there a little bit in spirit, if not in person. It's been really well received, and I actually got to attend one. It was a lot of fun. So just a nice event that's getting put on for some of our senior citizens here. And to kind of give you a bit of a snapshot overall in terms of programming, because that is just some of the highlights. We added over 120 brand new programs to our calendar. Some context in 2023, we ran 357, so 492 programs were run. There's about 260 work days in a year, so you average out to about 2 a day. It's a big offering. We saw attendance and engagement increase across the board. 5% increase over 2023 for children, a 46% increase for teens over 2023.
for everything that you and your staff are doing. Extend that to your staff the next time you meet with them, as we'll try to as we run into them as well, but amazing, amazing number.
And you came in halfway through the city last year, right? The whole year.
Ended in February, so
So pretty much the whole year.
close to the beginning.
Good for you. Good job.
Ian, do you have like a team programming specific librarian, librarian that focuses on that?
We do, that's Rachel Walden. You can see she's getting some money.
Yeah, I will make sure that she gets invited to youth commission meetings in the future.
Oh,
I think she did that.
Thank you.
She did that for part of it, so.
Any other questions or discussion for our annual report? All right, and we'll move on to new business, line item B, retention of council, Mr. Ingram.
So in speaking to city leadership, a couple weeks ago, it was recommended to me that I maybe ask the board whether or not they think there'd be some value in a library board retaining council. Christina Winkle does work for the city, but she is not actually at our disposal. She has really been working on our behalf as a bit of a favor to the city. But assisting the library board is not something that really falls into the terms of her contract. Not really something I need an answer on today, more I just wanted to get the idea out there to the board. That would come out of the library's budget if we chose to do it. So we would have to make some decisions, some budgetary decisions on that. Particularly with Senate Bill 2307 coming down the pipeline, it may be something worth considering.
Completely agree, as I looked through SB 2307 myself, but I think it would be wise, especially if that passes, to have some legal counsel, especially potentially legal counsel with experience, in public spaces and or library, especially with the weight of the consequences attached to that bill right now. I think it would be wise for it to protect our board and our staff, as well as do what's best for the patrons by having that.
I've got a question for Linda. Defense counsel can get expensive pretty quickly. How does the city pay for that?
The city does budget a line item in administration if for backup of other than our contract with Ms. Christina. So we do put in money for that. In my years here, I can just say that times we don't use it, times we've gone over the budget because of it. But something I just wanted to, with what Ian said too, that council just not only just for like the Senate bill stuff, but it would probably be a good thing too to just have somebody that looks over your policies and stuff that you want to address that has more knowledge. I mean, like you said, Christina does a great job trying to do that, but maybe that would be just something that you could bring your policies or anything like that to get a council review on that too.
Well, because then there's a broader conversation there, because like, I would imagine any council that would retain through the city, we try to put this in a way that makes sense, it's like, I would wager that the majority of those cases that we are litigating through the city are not necessarily criminal cases. Would that be accurate?
I would say, I don't think they'd be criminal, but I've seen a lot of civil.
Because we're in a whole different, we're in a whole new world now, if that passes.
That's correct. That is correct.
I mean, a lot of different things coming up, whatever. This gets to be more and more specialty,
Yeah.
specialty in medicine, or specialty in law, and Christina is good, but she's not specialized in some of the things that comes along, and so even the city reaches out to different directions, the county reaches out to different directions when it comes to legality, so
Well, and so that's the question that needs to be asked, though, like,
Yeah.
we're like, do you defend them to the nth degree, or is there a time we cut bait? Because, as a city, we recognize that maybe they didn't follow our internal policies. And so, like, that's a conversation that needs to be had too, it's not just about like the Canyon Council, it's about what do we do with that council, and how far does that council go? Yeah.
That's why I thought maybe it was city attorney for some direction.
Yeah.
What we need to look for, I mean, if we're overstepping her, job description or not, there's
Well,
a lot of city employees that are involved.
with this change that Director Ian mentioned about going from a Class B to a Class C, it moved from municipal court to district court now. So you might want to involve the state's attorney on that question too.
Mr. Guido, in conversation you've had with other public library board directors, or public library directors, is this something that you've heard in conversation happening across the state in preparation? Are there some libraries that already have specific counsel? What have you kind of learned? Have you done any research on what you've learned?
I have. I know for a fact, for instance, that the Bismarck library director seeks specifically to have an attorney as a member of her library board. It's an attorney and an accountant sit on the board to kind of assist with that. It's a pretty slick way to get some pro bono work out of them. I unfortunately was not that clever. But others do. Smaller libraries unfortunately don't quite have those options, so they're kind of at the mercy of what they can pull from the community. Some larger ones here are examining it. Another library, a smaller one that I had some discussion with Joe Rector. Jamestown has also talked a little bit about retaining counsel and as to whether or not that might be a necessity going forward. Yeah, lots of us are talking about making sure that we dot our, cross our T's, dot our I's, and should the law pass, that we are delivering it to the letter and not putting our staff at risk.
The staff of the full library at risk.
Absolutely.
And I think too, having specific counsel to that, like looking at the bill, I'm leaving the conversation a little bit, concerned about just keeping staff with the severity of the implications of the bill. Like, is our salary worth having to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be charged criminally? So I think having that might be, a nice confidence boost, I guess, for us as a board, but also for the employees, because I know that that has been a concern they expressed for them.
Absolutely. Felony charges being a possibility for coming into work is not something anybody really anticipated or expected when they signed up with the librarian.
So, I would be interested actually in like the Northwood Hospital, not Hospital Association, Library Association, if they have some type of like coverage that they might provide, because like, for example, I'm a member of the North Dakota Coaches Association, they will defend coaches up to $1 million. That's just part of like being a member of that group. And I know that there's other bodies like that that provide similar coverage. And so like it might be worth having a conversation with them or like the different associations that your employees may be members of to see if they actually have like blanket legal coverage.
And I don't know if the North Dakota Library Association has anything to that effect. I will check into it. I know the American Library Association does offer some assistance to its members in terms of that for cases such as this. So there are some options out there.
So do any actions need to be taken at this time? Are we hoping to just kind of watch the legislative session? Do we want to explore some more
I
avenues?
think exploration is a good idea because a lot of you behind the curve.
Absolutely. Should we just keep it on the agenda for next month and kind of just see where the conversation goes? Any specific asks for Director Anguiano? Besides just staying in the conversation, I know that it's your job and your employee's job, so I know that your concerns are there, so.
I'd be interested to know if the North Dakota Library Association, the blanket coverage that he's talking about, is that like a liability type coverage, or is it a coverage that will handle legal counsel, will kind of, if in fact there is any?
And as to NDLA, I do not know. I can find out. I'll look into NDLA and I will get the details from the American Library Association as well.
Well, and with all the conversation in the last several years, I would imagine that maybe there's even like some legal defense fund out there that you can pay a membership to.
That's, yeah, I thought we were going to look at that.
Yeah.
The state library,
Yeah.
have a legal counsel that is available to members.
Yeah.
Is membership to organizations like NDLA and ALA, is that something that staff members are, if they want to enroll, expected to enroll on their own, or is that something that we provide as part of library budget, as far as the monetary membership?
Do you have some budget for those memberships? That is through associations for that. And so we do have a couple. We do not pay for each individual membership, so my own membership to ALA is something I pay for, the library doesn't. But we do with the ALA here for several of us.
I mean, if that coverage is available and membership isn't like obscenely priced, I would be supportive of us just basically paying for staff to be members, because if that coverage is available based on membership to that organization, that's probably the cheapest form of protection for your fund.
I'd like to go back to the beginning of your conversation with us.
Yep.
When we talk about the policy within the city HR, that document.
Yep.
Are we trying to cover people that are breaking the law, whatever legislature passes down? Or are do we need to have something in place that says this is when we are no longer, because I think that's going to be part of that.
Yeah, because I mean, I firmly believe in like the concept of innocent until proven guilty, but like if we find that like they knowingly violated city policy or state policy, like and from the city standpoint, we're probably most concerned with the city policy. Like it's a fireable offense. I mean, are we going to defend somebody that we're not going to employ anymore?
That's what I'm saying, is that are we going to be proactive in that part?
Yeah.
Because it has to start at that spot too, that how far are we as the library wanting to say, yes, in your policy, will you please defend this person?
Yeah.
If they're actually in fact breaking the law.
Yes, I would just like to see you do more research on it, whether the options are out there.
Really on those avenues we covered.
Because by the time we meet again, the second half of the session is going to be well on its way.
All right, well then we will, if there's no other discussion for that, we will move on to business C, collection suggestions. Remember, hold, do you want to start the conversation on that?
I just wanted to open the conversation, since we started seeing patron requests. We really haven't had discussion surrounding it, we've just been given documentation each month. And so as I look at that documentation, I just have questions about it, and so I was just wondering if I could just gain further understanding on both children's collection suggestions as well as adults. When I look back to December, collection suggestions in January, there's a
So they have to go through the same process every item we purchase goes through. So you go look at copyright date, you go try to find reviews, you try to find these items from a reputable publisher. That process happens for every individual item we buy, and so we run patron requests through the same sets of standards that we do for any item we purchase. And so it does take a little bit of time per item to run through it. I know I've spoken a little bit to Jade, who was filling with collection suggestions for children's, and, you know, prior to November, her typical month looked like 0 to 7 collection suggestions. So to go from that to 135, each one of these can take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to review individually. It's a big task. Acquisitions is its own job for the majority of the library. The children's librarians and teen librarians have other tasks beyond acquisitions that take up a lot of their time as well. So, and it means we are going to review that request, but that item hasn't been reviewed yet.
Ian, just kind of follow up on Jamie's question there. When it comes to no reviews at all, what is the review made up of?
And so when we're looking for reviews, typically we're looking for reviews from reputable sources. So critics, educational institutions, others like that. We're not really going down into the comment section of an Amazon order and looking at, you know, what Ian had to say about the Lord of the Rings, because while he might love it, it's not a great indicator of that item's literary merit. It's just an indicator from a fan. So we are really looking for critical reviews when we are saying reviews.
So, what about in the case of, like, again, so like, how many different, like, review sources do we look at there? And like, is there a chance that those review sources could potentially be biased against certain books? And so therefore, they're just not gonna review them because they know libraries use them in order to curate their collection. And so if we don't review this and there's like a collective agreement that we're not gonna review this book, the library isn't gonna buy it because there's no reviews on it. You understand what I'm asking?
I do, and that is why we try to go to multiple places for reviews. We won't just go to a solitary publisher's website, for instance, and take everything those folks at Baker and Taylor say is gospel. We will try to go out and find other places, and it's pretty seldom that you'll find something with absolutely no reviews. It does happen, but that is only one criteria. No reviews on its own might be a reason to exclude an item, but it isn't going to be the only one most of the time. You have to be failing to satisfy multiple criteria in most instances for us to write off on an item.
Ian, oh, sorry. Can I ask you to specify the review specifics of like who is sought after for these reviews?
So a literary critic or an educational institution of note,
But do you have specifics of those?
I don't, and I'm not doing acquisitions here, so I'm not the person seeking out these reviews. We have standards that we set, those are the folks that our acquisition librarians are going out to find.
If we could ask the librarians that are going through these to get those specifics, I would love to be able to view them myself, and see what those look like. Because I think when I think of reviews on books, you do go to Amazon and you see the 5-star and then you see the 1-star, but at least you get both. And so
policy?
I also have a question about the publication date. I'm trying to understand better the purpose of the publication date.
So generally speaking, the state provides us with a set of standards. And one of their standards for best practices is when you're seeking out new materials, something that's been published within the last 5 years is the 1% required. So that's not something that the library staff is chosen on its own. That's just a little bit of guidance from the state as far as what you should be looking for when you're trying to find something. So, down from the state library, more than something that someone in this building decided. More, we just want to get folks the most current and up-to-date material on whatever topic it is we're providing information on. And that is one of the ways we try to do that.
Thank you, Ian. One of the things I've noticed in our deletions document that we received this month is that a lot of the children's fiction that was being weeded out is being replaced. And those publication dates are ranging well before 2020. And so when I read these things, it's just hard for me to figure out if that is one of the reasons, or the second reason, why this book here on this list is not being ordered, but then we're reordering books who are, like, the publication date for me, it's hard for me to navigate the.
So you'll notice when I mentioned that I said new materials, right? So we're talking brand new items that haven't been in the library before. If we're replacing an item, it's because it's heavily circulated. I know we've had lots of conversations in here about what the criteria are for weeding, and if folks are checking items out and it's circulated recently, that means you want it to stay. That is one of the criteria we use to ensure that an item doesn't get weeded, or if it falls apart because it is well loved. And they go downstairs and look at some of our dinosaur books. My goodness, they rotate. So publication date is not a factor for replacing an item that's already here and in active circulation. That is for brand new items that have not existed on the shelf yet. So that's the chief criteria when we're considering publication date. It's the same reason why you'll find copies of things like Anne of Green Gables or Pride and Prejudice on the shelf. It is because they've been circulating, even though they've been in print for a really long time. Patrons are checking them out, and that's how you identify to us, the library staff, that you want that item here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because of our new special collections policy that we created a few months ago, if there are new acquisition requests that would not meet the new purchase, but would fall under the special collections policy, there still would be potential of that being ordered if it met the criteria under the new policy.
Absolutely. So that is a place those can go to. And as you'll see, if you go peruse that collection, there are some older items there too that you might not more traditionally see because they fall under those criteria. And so that is also a consideration for acquisitions.
So publication date is not an end all for.
No, not at all. And there's a whole list of reasons that you guys have given us when you drafted the collection development policy. And in that policy, it says you don't have to satisfy every one, but every item that we buy will satisfy at least a few of the listed reasons you've given us to have it in the library.
And I think it would actually be worthwhile, maybe for patrons, quite possibly for board members, to have you guys procure like 3 or 4 different versions of the same book. A brick and mortar store version of the book, a library edition of the book, hardcover, just so we can see like what the different the stock is on the paper and on the covers and things like that. So like, because when you say like there isn't a library edition available, that might not mean much to the average person. And so like to be able to have an example here at like board meetings, or even like on like a display on a table as you walk into the library, like, hey, this is the difference between a library edition and what you would buy at a store. Because I think that would be worthwhile for people to see. Because like, I understand the library editions are probably hardier and can take a lot more damage. And And so, just so people can like actually like touch and feel them and see what because there's a significant difference.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to bring some in for you, and if you think it warrants something that one would like to see, we can certainly do something like that.
I mean, I would like to see that, because I think I have an idea, but like, when you compare, like, otherwise identical things, and see the difference and feel the difference, I think it's pretty impactful.
Ian, I just have a few more questions. So when we see February 2025 collection suggestions at the top in bold, is that timeline from February 1st to February 28th? Are we doing it like that?
Yes, we're trying to get you guys the figures from each month, this kind of a snapshot.
From
Yeah,
start to
so you're doing beginning of the month to the end of the month, so you can see what's coming in.
Perfect. And then the total pending, then we don't have those titles yet.
I mean,
So they will be on the next month.
they're still getting reviewed, yes, they get ordered.
This is just a new document, so this is why I'm just trying to define different things so that I can be understanding it correctly.
So I do have a follow-up question on that. On my total pending, this is for total pending in February. How do we know what happened with the pending from January? They just roll into the number for February,
And
or?
so, yes, they're just gonna keep on rolling. Right now, they're coming in a little faster than can be processed, and so that's the best we can do. The majority of these collection suggestions are falling into one collection, and there is only one person responsible for the purchasing.
Okay.
It's a big task.
So if it's still pending from the month before, it would just be after that total.
And that pending is likely going to grow a lot faster than the completed one, they keep coming in 100 at a time.
Okay, thank you.
So then truly the numbers aren't as big if it's rolling into. Would you
So
say?
new ones will give you a pending maybe there. I'll get some clarity on that from the staff just to make sure I have that right. I want to make sure the number that we're seeing is accurate. But yeah, I do believe what she's got there as submitted is just new ones.
Well, you add up those numbers, that's,
And then pending, I do believe is some carryover, if there was carryover.
it says 125 collection suggestions were submitted between 4 pages, so you have 10 additional on the total submitted. That doesn't matter though. So maybe that would be a carryover from the one before.
And it would be for January. I'll get some clarity on that for us.
I'm wondering if you could have a different line item for the ones that are still sitting from January versus the ones that are from the current month, so that you can see the difference.
Ian, how much additional time is this taking?
A lot. Just to be honest with you, to complete this, Jade said it took about 16 hours, and you can see how many are still sitting waiting. This is a huge time commitment, not just to go through each of these items, but then also draft this document. It's a big task. Is the board getting information that is valuable and useful to you guys from this? Because it's a very large task for programming staff who, as you see from our reports, is already doing it.
So is Jade the one that's compiling the total report, or like she compiles hers for her area?
She does hers. Grant Carlson, our acquisitions librarian, does one for adults. We've actually had no requests for teens, so that would be Rachel Waldo if we got them, but she's not received any.
Well, from the website, the DAPL website, I made patient suggestions, and there's only children or adult options. So there's not a teen book option in there.
And so the form was drafted before we had teen librarian, but anything that would fall into that age group would move over to Rachel.
Well, I for sure know that I have requested just in February month, the month of February, books that will be teen. And those are counted as children on this document.
And the age groups that they're going through, because they're reviewing and checking those age groups and then assigning those out. traditional, it's something we're getting from out. And that might be more expensive. We're for a library now within the consortium. Most of what we'd be requesting for you goes through the consortium first, and that's gonna be very cheap. We're ordering here from North Dakota. We use library mail, which is about as cheap as it can possibly be. So you're looking at anywhere from 20 cents to a couple dollars. Most libraries tend to lump things together. It is significantly cheaper in every respect than buying books.
And what about the true interlibrary loan?
And that's usually going to range somewhere between 90 cents for a regular old, because we're still going library mail, but it can go anywhere from 90 cents to $5 or $6. Library mail is very affordable. It's very close to trade. We kind of use it exclusively for this sort of thing.
I feel like a helpful document in next month would be to see how many, and I chatted with Renee about this, trying to understand interlibrary loan and consortium.
Sure.
If we could see how many requests from our patrons are coming through those two avenues, just numbers wise, would just be helpful to see that. The tricky thing that I struggle with is on this list, there's a lot of these that have been said that they are available through IIL, and so I was understanding it that that's not consortium, but those are two very different things.
And so that might be more terminology than a lot of the time where we're going within consortium first. We just don't have a term for it that is 3 letters and fast. Because a consortium loan for every one of those is half a sentence. And so she might shorthand it to ILL to give you an idea that we found it at another library and we're bringing it in. But not every one of those that has that designation is probably through ILL. Some of them almost certainly are, but I would guess the majority are not.
And then just one last question. When we have series within our library and we have the first 4 books, are we not trying to finish out that series, like from a librarian standpoint?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The big decider on that, unfortunately, is just a practical matter of space. This was a problem I actually ran into up in McKenzie County. I had 2 families who loved the Hardy Boys to death. As you probably know, there's about 600 Hardy Boys books. That is not an exaggerated figure. I bought 30 for them, but I had no space to accommodate the rest. We have a lot of popular children's series, and some of them are very big. Things like the Boxcar Children, Hardy Boys, Magic Treehouse. These are usually a little bit too big to accommodate the whole of the series, so we'll try to get you a good chunk from the beginning if we can. If it's a really massive series, we'll usually go out to other libraries that have the space to accommodate it and bring those in so patrons can still read them, even though we can't necessarily house them.
And that's not really a new policy, correct? Because I mean, I remember Goosebumps when I was growing up was like the big one. And we would always get mad when like older ones would rotate out, just because you shouldn't be on that shelf.
And no, it's not new. Unfortunately, this is something that every library grapples with to a lesser or larger degree. Just finite space on the shelves for these very popular series. It's tough to choose. So we try to kind of split the baby and do something to make everybody at least a little bit happy if we can. And I know it's not a perfect solution, but the reality is we just don't have the room. Fingers crossed, with an extension coming, it might be a little easier to accommodate some of those larger series, just saying.
Also for consortium or interlibrary loans, my understanding talking with you, Ian, is that if someone at that library has requested that certain book, that they get first dibs on that.
Generally speaking, yes, that library's patrons will have preference, and it's the same for us here. If you were to, request an item, and my brother out in Bismarck were to request the same one, because you are a resident here, you would get the first pick on that item when it's requested.
Do you find that the suggestions for
No, the volume of them is much smaller. They're pretty static, to be honest. And what you see generally is grant gets about 18 to 25 a month.
And all of them are typically granted, you
I
said?
wouldn't say that they're all granted, but the majority tend to be, unless he's got reasons not to. And Grant pretty clearly outlines why it will be or why it won't be. But he's using the same criteria as we'd be using downstairs. The volume is really where the big distinction is coming. He's seeing 20 a month, Jade's getting 5 times that. But you just see a pretty stark difference in numbers.
And you said when did that number significantly change? Because you had mentioned, I think I wrote down that November, we were on average getting 0 to 7 requests a month. Was that specifically for the children's collection? when you said
Prior
that?
to November, Jade really wasn't seeing all that many every month, and then it just kind of slowed. So, you know, December, January, we started seeing these, 80 to 100 coming in. We've got 135 for February. Yeah, it's just a good week.
Now, are these books they're requesting specifically for checkout? Is it being tracked like those that are requesting, are they coming in and actually checking out these books, or are we just submitting like shopping lists of things we wish we saw at the library?
See, that I don't know, and even if I did, I'm not sure.
Because I look through these lists, and there's oftentimes there's books that already exist in our collection, if not available through the consortium and interlibrary loan. And to me, my assumption would be that some people are just taking lists without actually seeing if they're available in the library, and I think that is just a waste of time of our librarians who are doing amazing things with programming in their collections. I personally don't look through the list. I'm not concerned. I know that in the state library, let me just double check, in the North Dakota Public Library Trustee Manual, our library directors' responsibility is to select and order all the books, and the board's responsibility is for the collection development policy. So for the board's record, and back when we voted, I am not at all concerned with this, as I know we have a competent library director, as we reviewed in the last month, and I know that he has a competent staff. And I think that we have a handful of individuals taking advantage of the opportunity to request. That is simply becoming a waste of time, in my personal opinion.
I actually support your opinion when he says 16 hours for this.
They could be doing something.
We continually go back to ask questions about policy that we have written. If there are issues with the policy, then we need to address those issues with the policy as a board. We've voted on it, and whether you voted yes or not, in our policy, it is the board's responsibility to defend that policy, whether you personally agree with it or not. Are there issues with the collection development policy, and does that need to be added to the agenda for next month?
I think more the fact of the matter is that the policy is in place, and these things are showing that maybe the policy isn't being fully followed. So to ask those questions and to bring about responsibility to them, to bring accountability, I don't see the negative there. I literally was just trying to understand this new document that we've received a little bit better. And what IILs look like a little bit better. We are sitting up here as a representation of the library board to our community. When people ask questions about those things, I feel like we should be able to answer them. And to me, right now, I can't explain what technically a professional review, where it comes from. Do you see what I'm saying? So it just having more information was just the whole point of this conversation.
And that's fair.
And I think maybe I'm misunderstanding here, but can I ask you a question real quickly? And nothing's wrong because I think you're right. It's a new document that we're like, a little bit overwhelmed with, because it's gigantic. But, and this is specifically about the amount that we're getting right now for the last couple months or whatever it was. And Ian, you said starting in January, November? Yes. Okay. What about that large amount that we're getting makes you think the policy isn't being followed? That's what kind of tripped
we should be bringing in materials that represent and serve our community well. And so now that we're seeing those things, it's just interesting to me because now we're seeing people in our community come and state what they would like to see, and we're also bringing about that was between 4 patrons, and I feel like that's very strategic information, because to me, if we're doing this in a totally blind setting, we should not be bringing in those specifics. We're not bringing in names and putting them as titles, and so it's manipulation of the situation, and so it shouldn't matter who's requesting it, how many they're requesting. The purpose of people being able to come and request things should be something that our library is excited about, because that's how you're going to know your community better. And so to me, it's just very confusing the hoops that are having to be jumped through. And if it's not one thing, it's another. And I have personally made patron requests for different books, and it's discouraging to know that I am a taxpayer in Stark County, and because it's, paperback or not, but it could be a number of these things. I can receive it through IIL. That just kind of goes to the bottom of the bucket. And, something with IIL, I'm very thankful for interlibrary loans, but they take time, and they don't get the regular checkout times that if it's on the shelf here, that our patrons would receive. And so those are all important questions I think that need to be asked about having, if we're going to have collection suggestions, that it's going to be part of our library website, just to fine tune it more, and to understand why some are not approved and some are. And for me, I look at situations like this and I'm like, okay, I need to gain more information so that I can be educated about this. I'm not a librarian, so all of the questions that I ask today was really trying to understand it better.
And I think you make a really good point there, is that, like you said, these things take a while. And it sometimes feels a little bit excessive from like the patron side of things, because I've been there, I know what that's like. I mean, trying to find a large print book in Hebrew can be a little bit difficult for something excessive like that. But my point is, like, if Jade specifically, as an example, is spending 16 hours on this, that's probably part of why these things are taking so long. And then I think to kind of spring on what you said there, with the 4 patrons having requested these some materials, sorry, I'm bad at numbers, but if it's 4 people specifically, maybe we need to look into, and not like to call anybody out or anything, there's nothing wrong with being passionate about the library, I mean, that's why we're all here, but looking into why it's 4 people specifically, not naming names, but looking into why these 4 people are suggesting so many books for the collection at once, and how we can solve the problem of Jade or any other collection librarian, whether it's child, teen, or otherwise, being so overwhelmed to maybe shorten those wait times a little bit, ease the load on the employees a little bit so we can avoid like what we had earlier. And I mean, I know that's not a specific circumstance, but we can avoid future circumstances like having to deal with excess overtime because this is taking 16 hours. And I know that those numbers are going to change, but if we're going to continue getting this many suggestions per month, that backlog is going to increase exponentially. And I think we need to kind of not nip the problem in the bud, because I don't think suggesting things are a problem, but to maybe stem the flow a little bit and see if we can make it a little bit more manageable. Because librarians are human, despite every evidence to the contrary that they all have superpowers. So I mean, if we can make it a little easier on them and streamline the process a little bit while making wait times a little bit smaller, I think that's something that would be good for everybody.
And for clarification, I wasn't saying that I have an issue with the library offering collection suggestions. That's part of our policy. It is, of course, we want feedback. In my personal opinion, and according to The library trustee manual for the state of North Dakota, I think it is beyond the board's control and concern. And this is something I've gone back to 100 times, that we supervise, create the policies, and we employ a competent director and staff to make those decisions. I know the collection development policy well, as I was not only on the committee the last time it was reviewed, but I have one of my own for my day-to-day job, and it is an intensive process. We have to know we have educated, well-qualified individuals making these decisions that I just personally don't think this is information that is of the board's concern.
Well, so, to peel that onion there, though, Troy, the question I would have is like, if our collection development policy does allow for suggestions, doesn't this work have to be done anyways? Like, if you get 135 suggestions, it's due work. So regardless, correct?
That is part of the policy.
The collection suggestions are referenced in the collection development policy, but they're not a requirement. It's a dialogue the library has with patrons. There's nothing there that requires us to review or fill in that list. An initiative that the library took to be there and work and communicate with the community so we can hear directly from you what you want.
So the 16 hours over the last 2 months is too much time to review the
That was
collection?
this last month.
That's in February?
For solely collection suggestions, I do think that's a little excessive.
Kimmy, I think you had great questions for clarification on this, clarified some things for me, but I would like all of us to get back to the original question. Do we need to revisit the policy next time we get together? Because I personally would like not to have to go through this collections every month. I just don't. I think it wastes our time. And it's not part of,
Right?
about the collections.
This is like the first time that we've actually taken time in the last 3 months to talk about patron suggestions.
We,
Just clarify.
I'm sorry to clarify, have we not for the last 3 months since we started this?
We didn't get to
It
it
has
last.
not been talked about. This is the very first time that this document.
But we've talked about books, and we've talked about books that are being collected, et cetera, and I just think we need to stay on our agenda and follow
I
the
understand
policy.
that. I put it on the agenda.
No, I understand that, and these are great questions, Kimmy, I'm not arguing, I'm going back to the original question. Do we need to visit the policy? Do we need to have these
I think
words defined?
really looking for clarification on how they're being selected, how the books are being reviewed.
I had a,
Just trying to understand that.
Well, we have a collection development policy, and all the questions being asked, you'd know the answer to it if we understood our policy.
well, but Brian, like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, I didn't know where we got the reviews from. Like, I mean, I thought that was a question that, I appreciate Ian's patient answering this, because this is like, explaining to the layman what you're doing every day. And so, like, I appreciate, like, the patience in answering these questions, because, it probably is kind of like a surgeon explaining what they do in surgery, and you can't really necessarily understand how it works, but, like, you're trying to help us understand it, and so I appreciate that, but, like, I do think that there's been some good questions that have been asked here, that help us be able to, when patrons ask us questions, we can say, well, okay, this is how it works. And so, I mean, I feel like this has been a worthwhile discussion in regards to getting those questions answered.
I agree 100%, that's why we want to put it on the agenda next time, not to change it or anything, but to clarify those questions and things, because I'm learning things too.
Well, and so, like, I mean, I think the only thing that we've talked about this afternoon that would maybe potentially be like let's talk about the collection suggestion policy, or the development policy, is, do you limit the number of books that a patron can suggest or recommend? Because if 16 hours is the issue here, and they're coming from 4 technology, like I said, you're probably gonna have to do this regardless. If you get a suggestion, you have to work the process. And if you get 135 suggestions, you have to work that process 135 times.
And that is what Jade has been doing, it's a lot to run through. But that's exactly what's happening, we're getting them, and we're going through them. It is a great deal. That's really all there is to it. It's a substantial report, and it's a lot of additional work.
I really like that suggestion.
What-
About 4 to 5, or, I mean, I'm trying to think in my
Right.
summer.
Mr. Ingrano, what do you think would be well, I guess it would depend on how many individuals, but if it was your decision to limit the number of monthly book requests, what do you think, in your opinion, would be something manageable for a patron to request?
I feel like 5 a month per person would be a pretty reasonable place to start. Our most avaricious readers tend to do 2 or 3.
So what's the max number of books that you can borrow at a time?
10.
Yeah, okay, so like, because I think about it like, if I'm a parent, like, and this goes to like the children request. If I'm a parent that like comes to the library once a week with my kids, and I get 10 books for my kids, you can burn through those 10 books pretty quickly. Where like the next week, you're returning those and you're getting another 10 books. So like, yeah, it's worth discussion. But I'm not so sure that like I support the idea of like limiting suggestions. That's the only thing I can think of though that would cut down that 16 hours.
Another one would be we saw how many are coming in that are already in the library available. So there's a lot of time spent on something where is it either their choice to do it knowing it's there, or are they not even bothering to look up, they're just going off of a list?
Well, so on the form, is there a link to like the digital card catalog?
There is not, and you need some knowledge of the card catalog to go in and find inside.
It'd be pretty easy to check that one off right away then. You would know that it's in the library.
If you go in and check the card catalog, you should be able to identify pretty quickly that it's there, it's not. But you need to know how to utilize the card catalog, and that you might not know.
So, but our librarians do.
Yes, you can absolutely come and visit with the librarian, and they'll get you there.
But I mean, we have like 80,000 plus items in our library, so that should be.
It's there, quite a few.
So, I mean, like, do we have like a step-by-step process that they follow? Like, is that like the first thing they do is to see if like we have gaps in the library?
And so generally, all we ask that you do to make a suggestion, we don't try to push it through a lot of extra work. It's
I'm talking about the librarians now.
Oh, the
Like,
librarian.
when they get the suggestion, is that the first thing they do?
Yes.
Yeah.
First, we gotta check to see if we have it.
Confused by patrons that are requesting materials that we already have.
I think understanding why patrons might do that, and this happened to me, is that I looked up a book by a very popular author, and it was actually, that it's under that our library has it, but it's on the bookmobile. And so it's not on the shelf. And so that is confusing to a person that is looking at it and it says it's in the Dickinson Library, but then you have to read further. And so that could be the misunderstanding in some of the cases, I'm just saying.
No, that can absolutely happen. I can tell you that's happened to me. When I was looking for items, we'll have stuff at the Medora Resource Center, for instance, and that might be the only place you have it if you don't pause and take a moment. Sometimes when you're trying to help the patron, you're moving fast. You don't notice that, I'll run down to the shelf. It says it's right here, so that's not at all impossible.
To some spur up, I have a question on this from the kind of the overview. Why are we reviewing collection suggestions when they're not on our policy?
Where are we at?
Why are we reviewing collection suggestions when they're not even in our policy? Like, we're not even, it's not
to meet the information, education, and recreation needs of all the community. So this would be the second bullet point, provide material that reflects the interest and diversity of the community. Those two bullet points are the reason why this list was asked for initially.
But we have a policy for that, it's the collection development policy, like, we literally have that.
I'm reading the question about the policy.
Yes, and that pertains to the process that we're utilizing when we select partners. We don't have any control over what a patron is choosing to do when they fill out a collection development policy, or a suggestion. I have no control over what they're asking for. So those guidelines are for the acquisition staff when they're buying. That's what you want them to do when they're purchasing an item. We're trying to hold requests to the same standards you've asked us to use when buying items. But you can ask for anything you want as a collection suggestion. We will review it and try to fill it if it meets the policy.
So what do we do if we feel like the policy, if there's been policies that were made in this packet here before some of us even sat on the board, what is the procedure if we don't feel like the policy is being followed, or if we're trying to find research about that policy being followed?
So
We're not allowed to ask questions for documentation about that, because then that's us trying to micromanage. Like, my understanding is that we built this policy, but it is also our responsibility to make sure that the policy that we put in place is happening. We have people in our community who've been sharing that they've requested books and they haven't seen them, or they haven't gotten any response back. This is how we follow up with those things, and this is why the documentation was initially asked for, to make sure that the policy is being fulfilled.
Yes, but collection suggestions are not a part of that policy. We are
But
holding
collection
collection
suggestions
suggestions.
show the interest of our community.
Absolutely, which is why we want to engage them. That's why we ask for them, and that's why, as you'll recall, when the last time we had this conversation, we told you the standing directive was that it adheres to the policy, and someone requests it, please buy it. That was what I told our staff, sent an email to that effect 2 weeks after I got here. I want to know what the public wants. If it adheres to the policy you guys have set up, I would like to buy it. And that's the directive that was given. But collection suggestions are not a part of our policy. We're trying to use the same policy guidelines that you guys have given us when buying an item to buy those items. Library staff are trying to follow the directives you set out for.
Ian, I have a quick question for you. So, based off this, have you heard of your staff having people coming in after books have been haven't been ordered, have people coming to follow up to see what the status is on them, or what the status on stuff that's coming in?
Yes, and on occasion that will happen. It happened before we started having any of these conversations. That is, collection suggestions are not new. We've been doing those as long as I've been here, probably longer than that by far. So yeah, if a collection suggestion isn't filled and you come in, you can absolutely come on up to the desk, and a lot of the times we'll still have the old suggestion so that we can tell you why it might not have been ordered, how it didn't fall into policy.
And I think that's the piece that is continuous, not just here at the library, but just in society, is we automatically go to the top rather than dealing with their issues at a local level. Part of the public speaker forum is, did you talk to library staff about this? Maybe that needs to be a part of the request. Did you talk to library staff about this? We're missing that. A part of our board is to be advocates for the library. And yes, we're here to answer the questions and we're here to talk policy, but we want to encourage our patrons to have these conversations with the librarians. Every time I personally meet with library staff and with the director Anguiano, sure, there are some conversations, but a lot of times issues hitting this table are never even presented with the staff or even Mr. Anguiano at the library. And so I think we just really need to encourage where the decision-making is happening with Ian and his staff. The policies are being held and created and monitored by the board. And when we go straight to the policy, there's so many issues that could be resolved if we were simply talking about them and talking about them with the staff. And I know this is getting a little off track, but so many of our problems, and that's all this board, I feel like, talks about is problems lately, rather than celebrate these amazing successes that we have, and giving credit to the amazing things happening in these walls. Most of these problems could be dealt with, or questions could be answered at that local level. Talk to the library staff. With that, I'd like to make a motion to cap requests at 5 per patron per month.
Second.
Is there any discussion
Does that need to go into a policy, or is that a new policy?
on the form? Could it just be a line item on the form?
Or you're just requesting it as a form, not as a formal policy before?
Correct.
I mean, it's going to go somewhere, it has to be in the two policies. So if you want it there, it should be placed into the collection development policy at that point. Because the form itself is also not library policy.
Sure.
This is library procedure drafted by us for the public.
So we can ask Ian real nicely to do that, and then we can fix it up in our policy. Right?
Well, if the request itself is a procedure, can we just edit the procedure? The policy is that we allow them, not that they have to be fulfilled. So the procedure is the form, and if the form says a maximum of 5 per patron per month, that would still stand. Correct.
And it was the conversation. President Flint, I'd like to at least go to 10, because that's how many they can check out at one given time. I think that if you're going to cap it, it should be at least what they can check out at one time.
That's one patron, there's thousands coming in a month.
We are at the taxpayers' mercy for that.
Right, but it's what they check out. Like, everybody else is checking out, why would we adhere to just one specific, that heavily in a month's time? That's a lot of money going to one specific person.
I don't see any reason why we need to have it at 5.
Other thoughts from the board? Discussion between 5 and 7 as, 5 and 10 as a cap, or do we concede at 7? Meet in the middle. It's hard right now, it's hard to get out here.
I'll revise my second. So you're making that a motion now?
Well, I'm looking for discussion. What do we think is a...
Still discussion.
Yeah, what do we think is a...
I don't want to see a cap at all. But if we have to have one, I'm going to try to get it as high as I can.
Just as someone who has requested books, like sometimes there's a series of a number of books that you know that if you get the first, like you're gonna want to continue on with it. You know, like for me, I wouldn't request just any series, but if it's a great series, and sometimes that varies. You know, like
Could the
there could be
request-
5, there could be
Right.
I don't know, and so I don't know what the answer is here, but just to mention that thought of series, because there is a lot of series in our lower level, our library. Just a thought.
Ian, can you whip up some statistics in your brain real quick? What is the average patron's request? I mean, are they requesting looking for one book? Are they really doing 10?
So, on an average, for our most active users previously, because we really didn't see that many requests downstairs before, it might have been 3 a month.
Okay.
And that seems too small a number to go to try to cap. So,
Yeah, no,
In
I'm good with
February
5.
was 135 by 4 patrons.
I'm good with 5. 3 is an average for littles.
So motion on the table is part of the editing the suggestion request to cap 5 requests per patron per month. Commissioner Marsh, are you rescinding your second on that? Is there a second for the motion? I'll second. Motion made by Kuhn, second by Kopp. Further discussion? Let's take a roll call vote on that.
You repeat the motion, please.
The motion is to edit the collection suggestion form to cap patron requests at 5 requests per patron per month. Motion made by Kuhn, second by Cobb. We'll do a roll call vote.
Hickman? Aye. Marsh? Hurt? Holman?
Nay.
Bonnie?
No.
Kuntz?
Aye.
Cobb? Aye. Carlson?
Aye.
This a 5-2 motion carries. That form is just available digitally, or is that both digital and print?
We have a physical form upstairs and downstairs as well that you can fill out.
Perfect. Do you communicate that with staff or make those changes? All right.
Can I
Yes.
add something to this now? Is it, and it's more work again, is it possible to monitor at this point how many people actually go to that 5 in one request? She actually was there time to make this vote. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it means that we're not asking for names on our report, anything we can do.
I'm not asking for a name.
Right. Like, say because we're not, like a number of patrons that made 5, or the max, max that out. That is one more step, but that might be beneficial.
Is that a problem, or is it not a problem, or is it something we have to do? I mean, was this vote actually worth it?
I think it'll be worth the time our librarians are spending on it.
And then we can see if we need to revise.
Absolutely. There's always an opportunity for.
And we have to think too, next month is actually, like you said, a catch-up month, because not all of them are in this.
Anything else for new business line item C, collection suggestions? All right, new business D. Remember that added building expansion, Ian addressed it slightly, but I'll let you,
Yes,
continue the
and
conversation.
it's unfortunate that, Mr. Orban and Mr. Gallagher left, because they do have some very, quite good questions, I think, in my head anyway. When this library expansion started, who decided that? Was it the city because it was city funds? Where did that decision come to spend that dollar amount to expand the library?
So the request to expand the library came from the library board at the time. The funds were committed by the city on the library's behalf. Those funds weren't drawn from the library fund, those were drawn from sales tax and have been held ever since.
Okay, so those funds are sitting in a different fund, correct? And it is drawn down now to about, 2.3 million, right? Because of the, $800,000, is it Bartlett? What, Bartlett was, okay. And now the J.E. Dunn has come in and is saying that the project would be that 3 million. And so last month, I want to understand that you were going to go back to city council and ask for them to bridge that gap. Did that happen?
No, I did not go in front, and that would be Ian's position to do that with my support. And as Ian stated, that we are waiting for final numbers as far as they can get down. And that's why we suggested that an engineer come in and give the specifics. But that $750,000 that was spent from way back it started in like 2016, into 15, into 16, is when this whole thing started. It didn't happen until 18, I believe, when we started asking for money from the city. Well, we never got it until 21. That's when we actually had it come down from a $18 million expansion, then it came down to 6, then it came down to 7, went up to 7 due to cost after the COVID. It went up, and then we decided to go the whole new way and not use the whole bring it down to just what do we need, and it was derived from that House Bill 1205. And so we needed to do that, and that's why it's come down to where it did. Then the city decided to go with the construction and managers to do the 3 major projects that we had on the books since in 20. And that was the museum, the library, and the Baylor building, and get this completed and be responsible to what the state has asked through legislation to get this done.
Okay. I just want to make a comment to the board. It was the board's decision to ask for this expansion to be done. Is it a good idea to spend $3 million on an expansion when we are in room of that bill 2307 and that cap on property taxes with House Bill 1176? I'm wondering if that is really a realistic ask at this point to do that and pull the trigger with groundbreaking in May, like you say. And I know this is not popular opinion, and it's not going to be, but we are asking the taxpayers to the sales tax. You said it's a sales tax, so the money's already there. But is that sales tax going to be needed for something else? Is that fund going to be needed for, what if we have to do something with the 2307 as far as restructuring? I don't know what it looks like. I'm just wondering with these 2 bills being so large that we not pull the trigger to do that expansion at this point and reevaluate it. And I understand that another year would make more costs, and I understand all of that comes with it. But if you're saving the $3 million versus spending it when you don't know what's coming, I find it hard to say let's keep going with the expansion. And as Mr. Oderman had clearly stated last month, that it's something that we should have been talking about a long time ago. So I'm surprised it wasn't on the agenda already, that I had to put it on here. But are these conversations that we need to be having? Do we really need to go forward with this?
President Cruz? I just want to address that with that property tax, 1176, that's the governor's bill. Okay, there's 4 other ones that are out there that are coming from the majority leaders and senators and stuff. They're all trying to combine those property taxes. We're never going to know what's going to happen. But one of the things that I can state is that no matter what happens with the property tax, the state is going to bring back the amount that we have always had. So in the 9 years that I've been here, we have never raised the property taxes.
And I understand that, but I also saw in 25's budget, we had to scale back 20%. And so with this cap coming, this 3% cap that could possibly be coming, and I find it remotely impossible that a governor's sponsored bill won't go through.
You're right, but it probably will have some changes. But all I'm saying is that the tax money that we have been doing, our values of our houses go up, okay? So we stay at the same dollar amount. So what that does is the valuation of the mill goes up. So our mills actually go down. So we get, okay, but publicly not. Okay, but what we do is we stay at that amount. If we do a 3% cap, that's $180,000 more. That's good for us, maybe.
The entire city.
That's $180,000.
That's the entire city.
Yep.
That's not just the libraries getting that those funds, it is the entire city. So.
And they get 4 of that.
Right, I understand that too. We get the 4 mills or whatever the equals. I don't remember what it was, 169,000 last year. I think that's what was it's in my head. But what I'm getting at is, and it's not just specifically for you, Ms. Carlson, it's for everybody on this board, is are we making a good decision wanting to bridge the 700,000 or whatever you need, are we making a good decision by asking for this expansion? This is a big ticket item in lieu of some problems. I mean, these two bills could very well cause some problems, and the unknown, can we wait until legislature is over groundbreaking July so that we know?
In my personal opinion of studying both HB 1205, which is now library law, and SB 2307, both of them primarily focus on minors' access to adult material, however may be defined in each of those bills. One of the biggest issues, and where we've had patron concerns, come from where some of our, the last book challenge, we moved an item from teens to adult. Adult nonfiction is still in the basement. So I think regardless of if this bill passes or not, it's still in the best interest of the Dickinson Area Public Library to remove adult nonfiction from the children's section, because it does address HB 1205, which is current law, and 2307, which will likely, with hopefully edits, still become law. But I do think it's in our best interest for the patrons and the board and the staff to separate. Now, might there be more?
What will that look like? Will it look like that this expansion is actually going to give room for?
This expansion moves adult nonfiction into the new section, so then the basement is strictly teen and YA, or sorry, children's and YA. So it does put it into a whole other section. Does that mean, according to 2307, that minors would not have access? That's a whole different conversation. But a big part of both 1205 and 2307 is just minors' access. And so currently, the fact that they're both housed on the same floor,
Why
access.
we should move it already?
Because there's nowhere to move it to. Right. And that's why we've edited that expansion so many times to its current state, which builds out the adult nonfiction section and removes it from the basement. So then the basement will simply be materials for minors. It'll be children's and YA, which addresses the current law and the potential law in 2307. So in my personal opinion, I think it's still smart to move forward. I understand all of your concerns, but knowing that since HB 1205 and the current SB 2307 are so focused around minors' access to materials, certain materials, that it would be in our best interest to move forward so we can separate that now and deal with other requirements when they come.
The expansion was brought down to this to just be able to articulate that change, to get them separated. So I think now is the time to do that, because it's do nothing, because we're not going to get more now. We know that. So I think it's the time to get that done, regardless of what happens to the legislature. It benefits the library either way.
And its patrons.
Yeah, the whole entity of the library.
I disagree. I do not think that we need to burden the city of Dickinson taxpayers any further by asking for the extra funds and moving forward. Those funds, if we could wait 2 months until legislature is over, so we have some better interpretation of what these bills are in fact going to cost. I mean, we're talking about legal counsel in that just budget items that are gonna be coming up. I disagree, and I don't support it. I don't know if there's anything else to say about it.
I've had that same conversation with Lisa, because I have to look at the other side of it too.
You do.
But one of the things that I kind of cast to Ian was, you tell me what you can do inside your walls to make this happen according to what these bills are coming up. I said, I want to know. Just think about it, and I want you to come to me, and I want you to tell me, if I tell you you have no money, what are you going to do? I didn't like the answer. The answer was, this community room would be our adult fiction, and there would no longer be a community room.
As I was sitting here, I was thinking that same thing.
And that would work,
That is the option.
but it would also,
Numbers that would have to go.
yes, all your programming would have to go, but it would also reduce the amount that you could have in this room, because it cannot fit what we currently have and stuff. So the selection would also be reduced. Your programs would go away. So you have to look at both evils there, what was gonna do, and my thought was, okay, what can we cut? What can we cut from the expansion to get this done and get in compliance with the community wants, and then be done with it? But not go completely to 2 lots, stay within just a smaller expansion that we can do and stuff. And that's what is entailed to J.E. Dunn, is to get this thing cut down to my expectation of budget and stuff, and that was 2.6. So we're around about 300,000 short. But that was my expectation, but we have not heard, and that's why we're waiting for an engineer to come in and tell us what they cut and what they can do for us and stuff.
Out of curiosity, are all versions of Blueprint, are any or all versions available to the public? Because I agree that, we're putting this task potentially on Dickinson citizens, but to be able to show them the work on how it's been edited over the years, that truly our best interest is, the interest for the community. Like, are any of those blueprints current or past?
The current ones are available, the older ones can be made available, we have digital copies of all of them, it's been a journey.
Any other discussion?